This video is all about what we can expect to see from Canon in 2023. Are we still getting 3 APS-C censored R system cameras? What about the R5 Mark II, the R7c, or even the Canon EOS R1? Stick around as I cover off all the Canon cameras and lenses expected in 2023. But first, I encourage you to subscribe and choose all notifications so you don't miss the latest camera news and rumors. Canon announced the R7 and R10 back in May of 2022. We had to wait until October for the next big announcement, and that was the Canon EOS R6 Mark II, although it's not expected to ship until the end of November. We did get a handful of RF lenses, including the 135mm f1.8 L series USM and the introduction of the RFS mount with the 18-150 and the 18-45. But we expected so much more from Canon in 2022. We were expecting the Canon EOS RP successor and a camera that sits between the Canon EOS RP and the R6. We weren't expecting the R6 Mark II, but we did get that. And what about the R1? We were supposed to have a development announcement earlier this year, and then the final announcement of the camera to be shipping in 2023 in the first quarter. We didn't get that either. No R5s, no R5 and many RFS lenses and even RF lenses. With so many camera models and lenses getting pushed into 2021, and then 2022, and now into 2023, Canon's got a busy 2023 planned. So first of all, let's take a look at some affordable APS-C R system cameras due out in 2023. According to Canon rumors, we think that there's a good chance that the EOS R50 and a lot more will be announced in February, just ahead of CP+, a Japanese camera show that begins on February the 2nd, 2023. Prior to the pandemic, this was a big one for the Japanese manufacturers, and we usually saw major announcements. I know what you're thinking. The Canon EOS R50, that sounds nice, but what about the Canon EOS R100? You'll recall back that earlier in 2022, Canon rumors said that we're getting a more affordable APS-C R system camera, more affordable than the Canon EOS R10, and it's going to be announced in September or October of 2022. Well, here we are in the middle of November, and there's no mention of the R100. Well, Canon rumors had this to say about it. The R50 could perhaps be the rumored Canon EOS R100. So not exactly a definite maybe for the R100, but the R50 or R100, whichever it's going to be, we're definitely getting at least one affordable APS-C censored camera on the R system, a camera that's going to sit below the Canon EOS R10. But as far as specifications, well, we don't have anything credible, anything that's been validated. Not too long ago, Canon rumors put out a list of specifications for the R100, which I don't think could be too far off the mark for the Canon EOS R50. It comes with a 24.2 megapixel APS-C sensor. It also comes with a Digic-X image processor. The Digic-X image processor has been put on all sorts of cameras since the 1DX Mark III, all the way down to the R10, and provides significant performance improvements when it comes to video and stills. 12 frames per second mechanical, 4K video, 24, 25, and 30 frames per second, and that dual pixel autofocus, I really do suspect it's going to be available all the way up to 4K 30 frames per second. But what some people might not like is that it doesn't have an EVF, although it does have a flip screen that's 1.04 million dots in resolution. In addition to the Canon EOS R50 in early 2023 and the chance of the R100, we're now hearing about another planned entry-level RF mount APS-C camera that would come below the Canon EOS R100. Let's call it the R1000 until we hear otherwise. But this is much ado about nothing. We don't have any specs for the R100 or R50 or even the R1000. But I think it's safe to assume that the R50 is a follow-up, a successor to the M50, but having access to a much greater pool of lenses. So that gives us 3 APS-C censored cameras due out in the first half of 2023 for under $1,000. Expect an announcement in early 2023 for at least one of these cameras, most likely the R50. Expect that announcement at CP+ in early February. Subscribe to get the latest leaks. So you jumped over APS-C censored cameras because, well, you just don't really care about them. You think they're as dead as DSLRs, at least in 2023. So let's start by talking about a pair of full-frame cameras coming out from Canon that are going to be under $1,600. The Canon RP successor, believed to have the R9 moniker, has been rumored since late 2020 and was expected to provide modest upgrades along with a price of $899. That's $100 less than the current Canon EOS RP. However, manufacturing issues have caused the camera to be delayed into 2021, then 2022, and in August, Canon rumors told us that the RP replacement would get another delay. We've been told that the new camera could be announced in late 2022 or early 2023, with a shipping date coming in Q1 of 2023. We don't have a lot of specs for Canon EOS RP successor, but it is supposed to get the Digic X image processor. That image processor's gone in pretty well every camera, and one of the benefits of that image processor, it's going to significantly reduce the rolling shutter that we got in not only the EOS RP, but the EOS R as well, and provide us with general performance improvements across stills and video. It should also allow us to push frame rates around 12 frames per second mechanical, and who knows, maybe up to about 20 frames per second electronic, although the buffer speed on this camera won't be nearly as capable of the R6, the R5, or even the R3. Oh, and on the price, being able to get this camera for $899 as the manufacturer's suggested retail price, we think the rising costs in the supply chain may have delayed or even nixed the rumored $899 full-frame R-series camera. No, say it ain't so. I don't believe that. I don't believe that Canon's going to completely nix it. They could certainly raise the price of the camera to $999, the same price as the current Canon EOS RP. They could even raise it up to $1,099. Being an entry-level full-frame mirrorless camera, there really isn't much in terms of competition from Sony, Nikon, and others that has a camera, an entry-level full-frame mirrorless camera for around the $1,000 price point. So I can't see Canon nixing this. I really can't. I really do suspect that we are going to get a Canon EOS RP successor, most likely called the R9, in sometime in 2023. I'd really expect it to be in the first half. As Canon did with the R5c, Canon is expected to deliver an APS-C video camera with the R7 as a base, and it's going to be called the R7c. With Sony having announced the FX3, a video-centric version of the A7S III, followed recently by the FX30, both are selling well, so well in fact that it's a high probability for a camera announcement by Canon in 2023 for the R7c. And the video specifications for this camera are more or less going to follow what we see in the R7. Just like Canon did with the R5 and the R5c, we're going to see basically the same thing. Now, the one question I wonder though, is the R7c going to have the Cinema OS, which a lot of people weren't too happy about, or is it going to have the same operating system as the R7, what all the other stills hybrid cameras get? Well, in this case, my forecast seems to line up well with Canon rumors. We don't have any specifics, but what we've been told that a cinema version of an APS-C shooter will be coming in 2023. The Canon EOS R5c has been well received by consumers, so it makes sense that Canon will continue with the C variants. And the big success that Sony's having with the FX3 and the FX30 also is a pretty good sign that Canon's going to continue with these C variants as well. We've heard very little on the Canon EOS R5s, a high megapixel variant of the R5, much like the 5D SR was to the 5D Mark IV. Rumors pretty much died off by the end of 2020, offering no further details. But every now and then, it gets a slight mention, teasing at a 100 megapixel resolution. And Canon rumors definitely considers it a possibility, a definite maybe. This is what they had to say in May. We've been told that Canon is indeed going to release a full-frame RF mount camera with 100 plus megapixels sometime in the first half of 2023. But with the expectations that Canon may announce the R1 with a resolution north of 60 megapixels, some are wondering if there's a need for a 100 plus megapixel camera, especially when this is the realm of medium format cameras. What do you think of the Canon EOS R5s? Do you think it has a strong possibility of coming out? I want to hear what you have to say in the comment section down below. This is definitely a niche market. So for anybody who's doing wildlife or landscapes or even architecture, yes, a 100 megapixel camera can certainly be a benefit. And even those shooting food photography or even fashion photography, capturing products, I can see the need, I can see the benefit of a 100 plus megapixel camera. But again, it is a very small niche market, like the R5c was to the R5 when it came to a video variant of that camera. And with so very little to go on in terms of leaked specifications, it's more or less conjecture at this point. So the real question is, are we going to see this camera in early or the first half of 2023 like Canon rumors said we might? Or is it just going to turn into vaporware like the Canon EOS 5D Mark V? Like the Canon R5c, the Canon R1 was talked about heavily since the 1DX Mark III. The latest mention from Canon rumors describes the camera as being the new resolution king, as well as having a big focus on 8K video production and tying it with Cinema EOS, though it won't get the C variant. In October of 2021, the R1 was described this way. Think of the Canon EOS R1 as a 5D series DSLR, a camera built for pretty much every situation. Quoting a source, a jack of all trades and a master of none, except that it will be a master of everything. A reliable source said that the R1 is real and in development as of late 2021. The Canon EOS R3 will help finalize the specifications of the Canon EOS R1. Canon has really started to build higher-end products with tons of feedback from users over the last few years, and this will continue with the Canon EOS R1 development. And as far as having a global shutter, this has been rumored in the past. It's sounding more and more like it won't. We're seeing sensor readout speeds that may be negating the need for a global shutter, and I expect the processing power in the Canon EOS R1 to be absolutely insane. And we know it's going to have a stacked BSI sensor because Canon put it in the Canon EOS R3, a camera that sells for $6,000, and based on everything we're hearing right now, well, the Canon EOS R1 is going to cost more than that. Now, we don't know if it's going to be $64.99 or $69.99, and that's the price range that I'm targeting with very little specs. And the reason I'm coming up with that price range is I'm looking at every other 1 series camera, and I'm adding inflation, and that gives me a price range of between $64.99 and $69.99. And with the recent announcement, well, I guess it's a year ago now, of the Nikon Z9 selling for not $64.99, but $54.99, there's extra pricing pressure on Canon not to take the R1 and put it that much higher. And as this camera is going to have a focus on 8K video production, we know that this camera is going to be able to do at least 45 megapixels because to be able to do 8K DCI on a stills hybrid camera, you do need 45 megapixels. So 45 megapixels is the bare minimum. Then Canon rumors came out and said, well, we don't think that Canon's going to produce the R1 with anything less than 60 megapixels. I've said in the past that I think 50 to 55 at 60 is the maximum amount for the R1 because I still look at the R1 as a sports camera, a fashion photography camera, anything where you want to shoot fast, you want to do sports, fast action. This is what the camera is primarily designed for, or to be the best camera you can get for fashion photography, product photography. So once we start to push past of 60 megapixels, 85 megapixels, well, there requires a whole lot of heavy-duty processing to be able to not only handle the video specs, but to be able to move all the data off of that sensor just for still shooting. I mean, think about it. If this camera could do 100 megapixels or 85 megapixels, that's a huge amount of data. That pushes well north of, I think, what about 1.8 megabytes per second? And right now, the fastest CF Express card that I'm aware of can only do a minimum sustained write speed of 1.5 gigabytes per second. Now, yes, Canon can improve the buffer, make it a much bigger buffer inside the camera like Hasselblad did, but that adds further cost, and you can't really upgrade that over time, but that would allow you to have a much faster buffer, so you're filling up that buffer instead of using the data pathway as a bottleneck. So it certainly could do something north of 30 frames per second lossless RAW with a whole bunch of tweaks to the internal architecture. The R1 is going to be a whole new camera, all new components. So we're going to have a new image processor, we're going to have a new sensor, we're going to have all new everything. There's going to be nothing in this camera that's going to be, well, borrowed from previous camera models. And the only question is not if we're going to get a BSI stacked sensor, but if we're going to get 2 image processors, 2 Canon Digic 11 image processors. Yeah, I could see Canon going back to 2 image processors. If they push 60 megapixels or north, well, they're going to require a whole lot more processing power, a whole lot more data movement. It's going to be an incredible beast. A camera that fits in your hands, a camera that's about this big, being able to do 12K oversampled 8K, being able to do 30 frames per second or 40 frames per second, to be able to move something like 1.8 gigabits or gigabytes of data per second, that's an awful lot of information. And I still think that somewhere around 50 megapixels makes a whole lot more sense, but the Canon EOS R1 is a little bit late to the game. Sony released the Alpha 1, about 2 years ago? And we're coming up to, well, just over a year, or about a year when it started shipping for the Nikon Z9. If the R1 gets announced in, let's say, mid to late 2023, that would put it at 3 years and 2 years, or almost 2 years respectively. And if, according to the latest Canon rumor, that we're going to be getting it in 2024, perhaps it is 2023, perhaps it's 2024, we really don't know. We haven't got any leaked specifications of this camera, and that's going to be one of the biggest barometers. As we saw with the R5, a 5 series camera, we started getting leaked information some 5 or 6 months before the actual announcement. And then Canon did a development announcement. Then Canon talked at various trade shows, giving us more information about the camera. And I expect Canon to do the same with the R1 to keep the camera in the news, to own the news cycle. I think we're going to start to get announcements as early as 5 to 6 months before the announcement of the Canon EOS R1. But that's an awful long time to wait. An awful long time indeed for a camera that's been, well, due to be replaced for many years. Sony released the Alpha 1, their flagship full-frame mirrorless camera, some 2 years ago. And then Nikon announced their Z9 a year ago, and it's almost been on the market for a full year. If we go into 2023, that makes it almost 3 years for the Sony and 2 years for the Nikon, and 2024 would make it 4 years, an entire generation for the Sony. We most likely will get the Sony Alpha 1 Mark II, and of course the Z9, it'll be 3 years, and we might even get a Z9 Mark II. We'll certainly have a Z8 and a Z6 Mark III, as well as a Z7 Mark III. So we'll just have to wait and see. And if you want to find out the latest news and information regarding all this, I highly recommend clicking subscribe and choosing all notifications. But now let's take a look at the rumored lenses for 2023. Way back in early November 2020, Canon Rumors released this list of anticipated lenses, their lens roadmap that they expected Canon to deliver in 2021. Everything you see in green here has already been released and is available on the market or will begin shipping soon. Everything in white are those items that we expect to see in 2023. Due to everything that's been happening globally, to the supply chain, these lenses were due to come in 2021, but have been significantly delayed. And yes, when it came to the aperture of some, they did get it wrong, but this has been one of the best leaks for the Canon EOS R roadmap. So looking into 2023, we can see 2 tilt shift lenses, the 14mm f4 and the 24mm f3.5. A pair of zooms, the RF 10 to 24mm f4 L series USM, and the 18 to 45mm f4 to 5.6 image stabilized STM. We're supposed to be getting the 35mm f1.2, and I'm chuckling here because, well, we've been hearing about the 35mm f1.2 since we first started hearing about the Canon EOS R1, and I think this goes back to even 2019, so we are supposed to be getting that lens announced in 2023. We're also supposed to be getting another super telephoto, the 500mm f4 L series image stabilized USM. I know what you're thinking. Well, Simon, what about the 1200mm or the 2000mm STMs? Where are these? Well, those were a CR1 when we heard about them and didn't make it onto Canon's roadmap. We also heard about 5 RFS mount lenses that were due to come out late this year, which hasn't happened, which could be going into 2023. But again, those were a CR1. I highly doubted that those were accurate, and it certainly hasn't panned out to be in, well, late 2022. So not a lot of lenses that we're seeing that are planned for 2023, but these are based on the leaked roadmap that we got from Canon Rumors back in 2020, and I suspect there might be some more surprises in there, especially if we get the R1. You know the R1 is going to be announced with some pretty impressive L series glass, but if that comes in 2024, well, it might be a bit more of a lackluster year for new lenses from Canon. So that kind of rounds up the year for 2023. We do expect a lot of cameras to come in the first half, starting with CP+. There is a chance that Canon could make some sort of announcement in the second week of January, leading up to CP+, and then all the way up to May. And then the next big camera announcement season is, as always, the second week of September up until the end of October. But with that being said, as we've seen an awful lot of lenses and bodies delayed from 2020 into 2021, and then from 2021 into 2022, and now 2023, don't be surprised if 1 or 2 of these or a few of them might get pushed even further. I don't think Canon can afford to do that. One of the reasons why they came down hard, like a bag of wet hammers, on third-party lens manufacturers is because, well, they're feeling the pinch. Canon is still behind with their mirrorless mount, the R system, and they want to have a lot more lens and bodies out a lot earlier on. But what we're seeing in the world today that started in 2020 is continuing, and I don't see it letting up until 2024. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we're going to see 2023 turn out to be an incredible year with new cameras coming out as early as the second week of January. And if you want to stay up to date on all the latest camera news and rumors, then go ahead and subscribe and choose all notifications. By choosing all notifications, as soon as I publish a new video like this one here, you'll get notified by YouTube, so that way you can stay up to date on all the latest news and rumors. And that saves you from scrubbing all the Twitter feeds, RSS feeds, all your favorite websites, YouTube channels, and even your old print magazines. So go ahead and subscribe and choose all notifications, so that way you can stay up to date on all the latest camera news and rumors. I'm always publishing on a regular basis. I cover all the major camera brands, all the major camera models, all right here on The Ordinary Filmmaker. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again soon.